Felix's POV.
I woke up from the sound of wheels squeaking along the floor. When I glanced up, there was a bed in the room. I stood and sat Saya back in the chair, being careful not to wake her.
How are they?
The nurse looked at me with a sad smile. They're stable, Alpha. Dr. Riggs will be here soon to explain what all we found and the surgery we had to do. My stomach flipped at the word surgery as I watched the nurse bow her head before walking out. The door shut and silence filled the room once more. I looked down at my little mate. From what I can tell, they've had the deep lacerations stitched, along with the burns dressed and taken care of. I'm not very informed on demons' healing abilities, but from the little information I have, they heal faster than humans at least. I sighed, rubbing at my temples. The injuries I sustained in the fight were already healed, and from a quick glance at the clock, I saw it was 5:30 a.m. I took a seat on the bed beside my little mate and held their hand. It was so small, and I would have been cooing over how cute that is, if it weren't for the fact that they were so injured. And traumatized, no doubt. I sat alone for a good 15 minutes before Dr. Riggs finally made an appearance. Alpha. I turned my head to face him.
Are they going to be okay?
He gave me a tired smile and walked to the chair beside the bed. He sustained multiple injuries from the gold chains I've been told about. I would like to think he wasn't in that cell for long, but I'm afraid with the amount of scarring, it had to have been at least a month. My jaw dropped at that. My little mate was stuck in that cell for a month, maybe more. We found what seemed to be a demonic ability suppressant in his wrist. Look here. He grabbed my mate's hand and flipped it over to reveal an earring looking like a silver hoop that stuck into my mate's bony wrist. The surrounding area of the skin was red and irritated. It looked quite painful and was definitely not supposed to be there.
And why didn't you remove it?
I shot him a nasty glare, prompting him to drop my mate's hand and sink back into the chair. I have no knowledge of what it's attached to or how it works. Operating without proper information could prove dangerous, not only for him, but for us. I cleared my throat to stop the growl from my wolf escaping. He was also pissed.
How could it be dangerous for us?
We don't know if it was put there for safety. I've heard of demons who cannot control their abilities and therefore are a danger to those around. I believe it's in everyone's best interest to let me research this device before operating, and if it's harmless to remove, I will do so. I was less than pleased with that answer, but it is the smartest decision.
Start researching then. I want this thing out of my mate as soon as possible.
He looked shocked when I said mate, but didn't dare to say anything about it. Instead, he explained the injuries and treatment plan for said injuries before making a swift exit, no doubt to rid himself of my death glare. At about 8 a.m., I fell back asleep in the chair beside my mate's bed. Alicia's POV. I was woken up by the sound of rain outside. After a quick glance, I spotted my cousin sitting in a chair beside a new bed in the room. When I went to stand, I realized someone had given me a blanket and tucked me in. That was no doubt Felix's doing, I thought while going to place the blanket on him. I sat beside my little friend and took their hand. It was still cold, but no longer blue and scary looking. I still couldn't tell if they were male or female, as they looked very androgynous. They had long, thick black hair that went down to their knees. I was sure the doctors washed them, because I couldn't find any trace of blood or dirt. They still didn't carry a scent, however. I could only pick up the clean hospital smell and the lingering scent of Felix, the doctors and nurses. I've never heard of anyone just not having any natural scent. There was nothing unique to them that we would use to track their whereabouts. That wasn't the only thing weird, though. They had an oxygen mask on, but underneath, I could just barely see their lips slightly parted, and the inside of their mouth was blue. I'm not talking about blue from the cold. No, I mean like when you have a blue lolly and it stains your mouth. This was so weird.
What are you doing?
I jumped slightly at the sound of Felix's voice, only now realizing how close my face was to theirs. When I turned to face him, he looked more than a little agitated. I was looking at their mouth. Did you know it's blue? He lifted an eyebrow and stood, making his way over and peering down at the face of my little friend.
Oh, my Celine, they're of royal blood.
I was shocked to hear that, but also more than slightly confused as to how he knew. How can you tell? What do you mean, royal blood? He sat on the bed beside me, taking a little hand in his.
Every shifter and supernatural species have a royal family. The werewolves have the Poivy family, as you know. The angels have their elder angel, and
He paused for a second, glancing up towards my face. I racked my brain for the answer, trying desperately to remember what I was taught in secondary school, until it finally hit me. The only demon I would think is a royal would be Sevolka. He's their leader. Felix nodded. My heart thumped fast against my ribs. They're related to Sevolka, and he doesn't have any family. Realization hit me like a brick to the throat. They're the child of the Demon King. I flopped onto my bed. This week was already exhausting, and it wasn't even over yet. Tomorrow was only Wednesday. After learning we had demon royalty in our pack infirmary, Felix was more than a little worried the devil might come knocking on our door, or violently break it down. I decided to have a well-deserved break from people and thinking, so I read me a good book for the rest of the day, and just now took a warm shower. Every little noise made me jump, and I almost peed myself when an Omega knocked on my door to say dinner's ready. Knowing Felix, he was still at the infirmary. I elected to just eat in my room and watch a movie until my eyes wouldn't stay open anymore.
Saya, are you in there?
I groaned a response as my door was opened.
What are you still doing in bed? Get up, we have a meeting.
Felix stood just in my doorway as I slowly got to my feet and walked to my wardrobe.
We're meeting with Alpha Dosh for the summer camp he's running. Be ready in 15 minutes and meet me in the courtyard.
Yeah, see you soon. He shut the door as I made my way into the bathroom. After getting ready, I walked downstairs and out the courtyard where I found Felix waiting with our betas.
All right, we have an hour and 30 to get this done. Is everyone ready?
Who's ready for anything at early-ass shit o'clock? I received unimpressed stares before Felix completely ignored my question. He grabbed my hand and we started making our way to the meeting hall.
So I have something important to tell you.
He seemed a little nervous for some reason, so I listened intently to what he was about to say. Yeah? He sighed.
I found my mate.
I perked up at that. If I were in wolf form, my ears would have shot straight up. What? Who is it? Again, I was faced with a nervous glance before he finally spoke.
It's the little demon in our infirmary.
My jaw dropped to my toes as I stopped walking. My cousin was the mate of a royal-blooded demon? Could this week get any more stressful?
Oh, and we're hosting the Moonlight Howl this year.
Oh, fuck. Alicia's POV. What? Felix grabbed my hand, forcing me to keep walking. How could you say that so casually?
How else would you like me to say it?
I scoffed and just bit my lip. The Moonlight Howl is an annual celebration for werewolves. Every year, one pack is tasked with the honor of hosting. It's a party for unmated wolves to find their mates. All eligible pack members and rogues are invited, and expected, to give everyone the highest chance of finding their mate. For those, like my friend Simon, it's the best opportunity in their life for matchmating, because they're in a small pack. I, however, would rather lick a toad than be mated to some stuck-up, know-it-all alpha man who has masculinity and pride issues 24/7. The moon goddess may pick mates who have matching souls, but that doesn't mean they'll be matching in character value or personal standards. She simply finds a pair of people whose souls mesh well together, but doesn't pay much attention to the personality of the two. Knowing her, she'll stick me with an asshole that neither myself or Felix will be happy with.
Thank you for being on time today. I trust you'll inform us if anything goes outside the plan.
The other Alpha nodded. Yes, Alpha. Thank you for this opportunity.
It isn't me who you should thank,
Felix said with a patronizing smile, and Alpha Doge turned to face me. Ah, yes. Thank you, Female Alpha, for choosing my pack to host the pup's summer camp this season. I nodded politely, not caring enough to grace him with a verbal response. I will get started with the preparations immediately. We'll take our leave now. He took his mate's hand and walked out of the meeting room. Felix turned to me. Are you sure he's the best person for this camp? What made you choose him of all alphas? I shrugged, leaning back in my chair and sitting my feet on Felix's lap.
I've heard through the grapevine that he's fair and kind to all the ranks, Omegas and neutrals included. Plus, his pack is small, and this is their chance to prove themselves worthy of my time and investment. I think they have a good location to make a wildlife reserve, and we need more in the area.
He leaned forward, resting a hand on my ankle while thinking. This is your way of testing his loyalty and truthfulness? I nodded. Loyal alphas are a pain to find, especially when there's a big increase of packs in poverty. They'll manipulate and abuse any powerful connection as a way of making money. Us being the last blood relatives of the Poivy family paints a big red target on our backs. Everyone wants the wealth of the royal alphas. Just then, the door was open, and a frantic-looking Asher greeted us. Female alpha, there's a problem at the border. I sighed, standing up to follow my beta. When he turned to face Felix, my apologies for interrupting Alpha.
Just deal with the issue, and keep Alicia safe.
I rolled my eyes and turned to face Asher as he bowed to Felix. Yes, sir. Just then, another head poked into the room. This time, it was Beta Colton. Alpha, something's happening in the infirmary. Dr. Riggs has requested your presence immediately. Felix stood and followed Colton down the hall as I followed Asher to deal with the border issue. Life for alphas is never boring, unfortunately.
Felix's POV.
We made it to the infirmary. The instant I stepped into the hall, my hair stood on end. My wolf went crazy, and I felt this dehumanizing feeling of dread churning in the pit of my stomach. Alpha, thank goodness you're here. One of the nurses rushed over, practically gasping for air.
What's happening?
She seemed confused and afraid. Her hair was frizzy, and I could see the blood on her coat. The boy you brought back has woken up. He's... I didn't stay long enough for her to finish, and just rushed straight to the recovery room my mate was last in. As I got further down the hall and turned the corner, I heard terrified cries, of which I didn't recognize the voice. But I immediately knew it was my mate. This feeling in the pit of my stomach wasn't mine. It was theirs. At that realization, I began running, passing startled and worried nurses, doctors, and patients. When I got to the room and opened the door, what I saw broke my heart as I was immediately hit with a strong smell of lemons and strawberries. My mate was huddled in the corner by a window, shaking and sobbing, with blood running down their wrists. Dr. Riggs was standing in front, trying to talk, but the instant he stepped closer, they let out a blood-curdling scream as if he was about to murder them. Please, calm down. It's okay. He didn't get another word in before I had grabbed his shirt collar and pulled him behind me. Alpha, wait! Ignoring his words, I leaned closer, trying hard not to let my wolf rip the doctor's head off. I focused all my attention to my mate.
Hey, do you remember me?
They didn't stop crying. They didn't even look at me.
I know this is scary, and you're confused. You don't know what's happening or where you are, but I promise no one's going to hurt you.
The crying continued, but they turned to look at me, slowly tracing their eyes from my tie up to my chin. They didn't look me in the eyes and seemed to just be staring at my nose, but I didn't care.
Do you remember that I was the one who carried you out of that cell? I brought you here to this safe place. You won't be hurt here.
The crying didn't stop. It seemed like they were barely listening to a word I said as they shook and trembled in the corner. Alpha, if I may.
You may not.
I turned to face Dr. Riggs, maybe letting too much of my wolf's anger seep into my actions.
What happened? What did you do to them?
I removed the small ring. It began bleeding profusely, and we feared he might bleed to death as we couldn't stop it. My heart dropped at that. I had wanted the ring gone, but now that it is, my mate was sobbing and shaking on the floor. I can't help but to worry if it was there for good reason. Deciding that I just needed to calm them down, I slowly sat in front of them.
Is it too bright in here? Would you like us to turn the lights off?
That was the only question I could think of after I saw their eyes squinting in the bright room. A few seconds passed before I motioned for Dr. Riggs to cut the lights. Immediately, my mate calmed a little. It was unsettling to hear crying in a dimly lit room, but what mattered most was comforting them, and lack of light seemed to be helping. I leaned closer, thinking that if I could just get them into my arms, that touch might help.
Do you understand what I'm saying? Can you speak English?
I spoke while slowly moving my hand towards theirs.
Is that why you're so confused? 'Cause you don't understand what I'm saying?
I was shocked, to say the least, when their glowing eyes made contact with mine.
Can you understand me?
They trembled with tears rolling down their face. They kept getting paler by the minute, no doubt losing a lot of blood. Finally, my fingers brushed their hand and tingles shot up my arm. When they didn't scream or try to get away, I slowly pried their fingers off their arm, placing my other hand gently on their shoulder.
Is it okay if I hug you? Would that make you feel better?
No words left their mouth, but I took the lack of a resistance as a yes, and carefully pulled them into my lap, wrapping my arm around them in the process. They leant against me, but continued the crying and shaking. Alpha, we need to sedate him. He could be dangerous to—
Shut it! What were we doing about them losing blood?
Dr. Riggs sighed. Apply pressure where he's bleeding from the IVs he ripped out. I'll go get the things to stitch his wrist laceration. I did as he said, still wondering how my mate woke up. Eventually, I got them calmed down, thank the goddess for that. But now that they had to get stitches, after the shot, to numb their wrist, which elicited a lot more crying, Dr. Riggs began to stitch the laceration caused by them removing the silver ring. He cleaned the blood off and decided against putting the IVs back in after my mate started screaming when he grabbed the needle. He then left to get a new hospital gown as I continued to recalm my mate. I slowly rocked them in my arms. That seemed to do the trick, as very soon they were just sniffling.
Can you tell me your name?
No response. It was at this point I was seriously starting to think they didn't understand English. It also confused me as to why the nurses and doctors referred to them as he, when we didn't know their gender. I was pulled out of my thoughts when something bright was shown in my face.